Okay, guys, we back with the part number two. Okay, so the part number two will be a specific focus on the Haitian Revolution from 1791 to 1804. So let me share my screen so you can see what we're going to talk about, and then okay. So the part number two, as I said, the Haitian Revolution, the 1799 to 1804. It will be the causes of the revolution, a chronological, in-depth view of the Haitian Revolution. So step by step, we're going to see the evolution, the intrigue, the intrigues that are playing on the political side, on the military side, the alliances, the frictions between the different factions. And actually, we'll have a certain focus on Toussaint Louverture. Okay, Toussaint Louverture is a complex persona who is very different from Jean-Jacques Dessalines, but you will see there are different key figures that will be interesting, as well as the key events. We'll talk about this, the international response, and the political landscape between different countries and different factions. So this is why the Haitian Revolution is kind of a complex and multifaceted event. Guys, before we get into the meat of part number two, what I wanted to do is to go through the key figures and key events that played a significant role in the Haitian Revolution. First of all, we can name naturally Toussaint Louverture, a former enslaved person who emerged as a brilliant military leader and strategist. He led the rebel forces to victory over the French and Spanish armies before he got, betrayed by the French and sent back to France, and then died in Fort de Joux. Jean-Jacques Dessalines is a former enslaved person as well, and who played a key role in the revolution, because after Toussaint Louverture was sent to France to die, he became the first, the real leader of the revolution, and then became the first leader of independent Haiti. Napoleon Bonaparte, naturally, he is the military leader in France who rose through the ranks of the military, hierarchy to become, general, and to lead a coup d'état, to become the dictator of France, and becomes the consul for life, then the emperor of the French. General Charles Victor Emmanuel Leclerc was a French army officer who served during the French Revolutionary War, and he was a friend of Napoleon Bonaparte. He was also he had the benefit of becoming the husband of Pauline Bonaparte, the sister of Napoleon. In 1801, Leclerc was sent to Saint-Domingue, where invasion forces under his command captured and deported Haitian leader Toussaint Louverture to France as part of an unsuccessful attempt to reassert French control over Saint-Domingue, to reinstate slavery in the colony. Henri Christophe, another former enslaved person, became a powerful military leader and governor and king of the northern part of Haiti. So we can also name the slave revolt of 1791, this uprising led by Duty Bookman that you will hear about in a few minutes. A voodoo priest marked the beginning of the revolution, and actually the Declaration of Independence in 1804. The Haitian people declared their independence from France, establishing the world's first Black republic outside of Africa, or precisely to a monarchy under Jacques I of Haiti. That will be it. And then any revolution, as you remember, we've been through the American and French Revolution comparison analysis, and we could see that the complexity is very difficult to see through, and we have to go back in history in order to appreciate. If you were in the middle of all these events, it will be extremely difficult to describe what was happening, because You don't even recognize when you have something that is really making history. But all these elements were making history. But now, as I said, any revolution, the American one, French one, or the Asian one, any revolution is a complex and multifaceted event with a variety of contributing factors. But let me list a couple of factors that were quite important. The growing discontent among enslaved people. The harsh condition and brutal treatment of enslaved people in Saint-Domingue led to widespread resentment and desire for freedom. Like any situation, like the Code Noir, if you remember on the roots of racism, it was describing the Code Noir. The Code Noir, it's horrible. The way you treat people, the way you treat people like objects. And people know that these are human beings. They know it. They know they are human beings because the blood is red, the organs are the same, the anatomy is the same. They are humans, but you're treating them like objects. So at some point, people will be enough is enough. So the growing discontent amongst enslaved people. Second of all, influence of the French Revolution. The French Revolution is already started in 1791. It's already the second constitution of France. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, inspired many enslaved people and free people of color to question the legitimacy of colonial rule and demand greater rights. Because indeed, you have free people. This is already the beginning of what? A middle class. As we said in part number 1, we see the creation of a pseudo middle class, which is similar to the American Revolution. Why people wanted to have independence? Because they wanted to enrich themselves. Okay, and they wanted to be free and to have a participation in the political power or the political representation, and they didn't have that. The same for France. We could see that the tiers état was literally pushed aside. People were paying 100% of the taxes. They didn't have any political representation. It wasn't possible for them to have a living or to expect a better future because they didn't have any possibilities. The same for the free people in Haiti, in Saint-Domingue. Actions of white colonists. The actions of white colonists were often divided amongst themselves and engaged into conflicts with free people of color, contributed to the growing tension that led to the revolution. Yes, indeed, because free people wanted to have full rights, opportunity to thrive, for prosperity. You see what I mean? But they were discriminated quite a lot by white colonists. Okay. Now, I'd like to point out something. There's a very interesting article that I will put the description, the details in the description. That is the fall of Toussaint Louverture and the treachery of the French. That is written by Caroline Flick, The Making of Haiti. And she had published this article in History Today in June 2020. Caroline Flick she's actually an history professor in Concordia University in Montreal. I'm trying to be in contact with her to have perhaps a podcast with her to discuss about this subject, about Haiti. But at the moment, she hasn't responded yet. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Toussaint Louverture just to open the scene, and then we'll go in through the chronological events for the revolution. Regarding the origin of the name Toussaint, it is believed to be derived from the French word Toussaint. Toussaint, it's all saints, all the saints. Tous is all, saints is saint, so Toussaint. This name is often given to children born on All Saints' Day, November 1st. It is possible that Louverture was given this name at birth or later in life. Later in life, because in a military kind of a situation, it was given the name, Louverture, because it was creating openings every single time on military, kind of scene, right? So the origins. Louverture is said to have been born in May 1743 or 46, it's not really clear, on the Breda plantation in Haut-du-Cap, Saint-Domingue. Isaac Louverture, his son, is a significant source of his father's biography. He says Toussaint Louverture was born in the colony, either 43, 46 is not really clear, the grandson of Arada ruler Gao Guignou. By 1776, Toussaint Breda, a former slave, was free and working for the white Creole Comte de Noé. By the end of the decade, Toussaint was seeing Suzanne Simon Baptiste, an enslaved lady from Placide. Louverture and Suzanne had two children, Isaac and Saint-Jean, the latter of whom was born in 1791, the year the revolution began. Okay, now this is only the opening scene about Toussaint Louverture, his origins. Now we're going to talk about a revolution begins. Okay, so it starts in 1791. The same year, you have the second constitution in France. So it sounds really details, perhaps because you're listening, you're saying, oh, it's only a detail. No, everything is related, and you will understand why. Okay, 1791, a group of enslaved individuals led by Boukman Douty met in the jungle near a Morne Rouge estate on October 14, 1791. In a Bois Caïman ceremony, an enslaved lady named Cécile Fatiman killed a pig and presented its blood to the troop, reportedly starting the Haitian Revolution. Boukman then reportedly called for war in Haitian Creole, saying, "The God of the white calls him to commit crimes. Our God asks only good works of us. But this God is so good, orders revenge. He will direct our ends. He will aid us." So supposedly, the white men are led by Satan, but the real God is actually calling for revenge. So then suddenly over 1,500 coffee and sugar estates had been destroyed by September 1791, and 80,000 slaves were in open rebellion. In response, the French National Assembly, now we are part of the revolution, the monarchy itself is not finished, but the social order of aristocracy, clergy, and tiers état is now over since August 1789. Okay, now we have National Assembly. This is the representation of the people. The French National Assembly sent 3 civil commissioners to restore order. After it failed, a second French commission of Léger Félicité Sontonax, Étienne Paul Verel, and Jean-François Ayot were sent to end the revolt. Okay. Now we accelerating in 1792. In 1792, we see Spain declaring war on England and France in May 1792. And France, in the midst of its own revolution, killed Louis XVI and declared war on England in January 1793. England, France, and Spain fought for what? The control of the world's richest sugar colony, Saint-Domingue. 1793, in June, much of Cap Français burned, and the white people of Saint-Domingue fled to the US or Cuba. Paul Verel and Sontonax, the emissaries from the French National Assemblies, issued separate general emancipation orders for respective colony districts in desperation. In the midst of these events, Louverture became the rebellion's most significant commander, pressing his forces to abolish slavery. Louverture's unity cry was published on August 29. Now, he said, brothers and friends, I have undertaken vengeance. I want liberty and equality to reign in Saint-Domingue. I work to bring them into existence. Unite yourselves to us, brothers, and fight with us for the same cause. So you see, this is a cry of unity for the rebellion. 1794, by February, the French Jacobins, the political party in power, had to abolish slavery nationwide in February 1794. Louverture and his army defeated England and Spain with Etienne Lavaux, a French general. After this victory, Lavaux christened Toussaint as Louverture, adding this man makes an opening everywhere he goes. So he creates opportunities everywhere he goes. He's a strategist, a military strategist. 1796, Sontonax, deputy of the French legislature, appoint Louverture as commander-in-chief of the army. So he's now a general of the French army. In 1797, by August, Sontonax is forced out to return in France by Louverture because he's now the commander-in-chief. He says, I don't need you anymore, resulting in an humiliating and forced expulsion for Sontonax because he's the representative from the National Assembly in France. He's supposed to be taking order from them and not to order them. Okay. The remaining civil commissioners defer to Louverture, reaffirming that he is the most powerful figure in Saint-Domingue. Instead of gaining any favor abroad, he's identified as a major threat because they have a plan in motion. But Louverture doesn't know it yet. By fall and winter, Louverture's army conquers most of British-occupied Saint-Domingue in the west. In the south, Rigaud's army conquers the British at Jérémie. So you can see he's a real strategist. So he's named as the commander-in-chief of the army just to get rid of the competition. After the competition is get rid of, it's going to be a different strategy for the French against Saint-Domingue. 1798, in March, the British surrender the fight of Saint-Domingue and negotiate peace with Louverture. They don't negotiate with the National Assembly emissaries. They negotiate with Louverture. He's now almost like the leader of Saint-Domingue. Louverture agrees to grant full amnesty to French citizens who didn't fight with the British. All black troops enrolled in the British army. April, after Sontonax returns, because he went back in France, France sends another agent to Saint-Domingue. Commissioner Edouville visits Le Cap. His goal is to propagate French legislative laws, entrench respect for French national authority, discourage people from abusing their freedom, and strictly enforce French law on 1771 immigrants. Edouville divides Louverture and Rigaud to weaken him in response to France's growing dread of Louverture and his black army. Despite failing, Edouville forces Louverture's resignation from the Directory. He's no longer part of the political system in place after the National Assembly, disparaging him in France and replacing him with 3 European generals. He sends black men back to plantations and fills the Saint-Domingue army with white soldiers. Slaves see Edouville acts as an attempt to re-establish slavery, sparking new uprising. But it was the plan all along. They wanted to get rid of the competition with the black soldiers, with Louverture as commander-in-chief. Now that they achieved that, they just need to get rid of Louverture and go back to the real business, slavery. Tons of money to make. June, Louverture signs a secret alliance treaty with England and the United States. Very interesting though. because England is already in competition with the French, in war with the French. United States is an ally to the French and an ally to England in terms of trade. And secretly, Louverture negotiates something with England and United States to grant himself some possibility of independence from France. October, British forces abandoned Saint-Domingue to avoid disrupting French colonial trade. After its conflict with Spain and England, colonial imports revived the French economy. Merchant bourgeoisie lobbied to revive slavery. Napoleon Bonaparte is under pressure in France to overthrow Louverture and retake Saint-Domingue, because all these people that were making a fortune out of slavery and the triangular trade, they want to get back to it because they're going to make a fortune. And Louverture is in the middle of it. So they need to get rid of it, to get rid of him. Late October, in a mistake, Hédouville attempts to arrest Moïse. Moïse is Louverture's nephew and the idol of the black workers. He escapes and calls for black laborers to take up weapons. Louverture sends Dessalines. Jean-Jacques Dessalines is one of the commander of Louverture. Send Jean-Jacques Dessalines and his forces to the Cap to arrest Hédouville. In the south, colony-wide mulattoes, mixed people like me, join Rigaud. Louverture strengthened and reorganized his northern army. In 1799, in July, civil war between Louverture and Rigaud, because they're part of the same army, the French army. But now, since the French are trying to reenact slavery, they're now opposed. They work together against the British and the Spanish attempt to control Saint-Domingue, but now they are opposed. Okay, so Rigaud takes Léogane and Jacmel. Louverture takes Petit Goave. This race and class-based power struggle advantages the Americans and British, who want to maximize commerce at the expense of the French. You see, this is all a piece, a chessboard piece. They're all working together, but trying to backstab, themselves all the time. This is what they do. They are in alliance, and the British and the Americans are backstabbing the French, and vice versa. This is totally crazy. From this perspective, on international politics, Saint-Domingue was being used as a piece on the chessboard, and in its internal fights would determine the political and economic gains each of the three foreign powers sought. August, Louverture has led France to victory and exiled Lavaux and all the French commissioners, becoming the colony only leader. Okay? Louverture proclaims his heroism. I've been battling for a long time, and if I must continue, I can. 3 nations were defeated by me. They were not Louverture's only competitors. Some of the Louverture's fellow officers who had been enslaved, and his children helped capture him. This is the reality. It was not really fundamentally followed. People didn't trust him too much. And you will see that this is what I'm going to say is a good example of the trust he had in the French. And that was really strange, because the French couldn't be, taken seriously, because they were backstabbing all the time. Like many notable free men of color, Louverture sent his 2 oldest sons, Placide and Isaac, to Paris to study. Napoleon's wife, Josephine, a Martinique native, said these youngsters were hostages, whereas Isaac says they were pampered like kings in France. They were well treated, no problem. They were going to school and everything, no problem. Josephine said in her memoirs that she advised her husband not to send an expedition to Saint-Domingue because it will be a fatal move that will forever take this magnificent colony away from France. In reality, Josephine understood from the get-go that the genius of Louverture was difficult to manage. So instead of fighting him, the goal was to make an alliance with him. And that's what she wanted to do from the get-go. Instead, Josephine advised her husband to keep Toussaint Louverture, to keep him, because he was a real ally of the French. He really believed in the French. That man is needed to rule the blacks. She asked, what objection could you have against this leader of the blacks? He's smart. He has the etiquette. He knows the French. He likes the French. He has always maintained a correspondence with you, my husband. He has done even more. He ended up his children as hostages because he trusts us. November, Bonaparte overthrows the Directory in France, destroying the Democratic Republic and its anti-slavery principles. He declares himself consul for life, restores the pre-revolution status quo of white rules, and turns his attention to France's colonies. Why? Because the triangular trade is making people extremely rich. So instead, he directed his brother-in-law, the general Charles Victor Emmanuel Leclerc, to head to Saint-Domingue to crush what he perceived as Louverture's usurpation of his authority. Because now he kicked out all the National Assembly commissioners, and he's the only leader of the Saint-Domingue colony. He's leading it. Okay. Now he's usurping, in the view of Napoleon, he's usurping his authority because he should be only part of the army, but not leading the colony. So now 1800, April, Louverture sends a military expedition into the Spanish Santo Domingo to bring the territory under his rule. At the same time, a mass uprising of armed black workers break out in the north in support of Louverture. Louverture's negotiations with the Spanish ultimately fail, but he successfully gains the masses' popular support. Moïse marches, Louverture's nephew, marches in the south with 10,000 troops. May, Bonaparte sends another delegation to Saint-Domingue to confirm Louverture's rule and establish France's latest constitution, because Saint-Domingue is still a colony. Now they're fighting to keep Saint-Domingue whole against Spanish, against the British. But now Saint-Domingue is still part of the French territory, just a colony. The one that is leading the colony is Louverture. And now what is interesting is the new constitution from France mandates that French colony be governed by special laws that take into consideration local conditions. Because naturally, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Saint Lucie, and Saint-Domingue are fundamentally different from the metropolitan territory. It stipulates that Saint-Domingue will not be represented in French Parliament, lack of political representation as the American and as the tiers-état, but it will not be regulated by French laws, while not addressing emancipation. The Constitution is carefully crafted to convince blacks of its stature. So the Constitution is solid. It won't budge. Okay. So Louverture, meanwhile, is focused on ending civil war in the south and disarming Rigaud and his army. Because now Rigaud wants to take control of Saint-Domingue, but Louverture wants to keep the control. Okay. 25th of July, Dessalines defeats Rigaud with the help of the American vessels in the Jacmel port. American vessels, USA. So they defeat another general from the French army. while the American Revolution was supported by the French. And the Americans still have a debt against France. That we will see in part number 3, nonetheless. Louverture exiles Rigaud to France, so he doesn't kill him. He said, go back to France, and redivides the areas of conflict. He grants general amnesty to every person who helped him fight Rigaud. 13th of August, Louverture is proclaimed the colony's supreme commander-in-chief because Rigaud is gone. He's now controlling everything. He and his revolutionary army of ex-slaves are the uncontested dominant forces in Saint-Domingue, and he begins to impose what is essentially a military dictatorship. But that's normal. It's military. A military is a hierarchical structure. In that case, you have a commander-in-chief on top, and people follow. Otherwise, this is not the army, right? Okay, so he has an army of 20,000 men to enforce his position as absolute master of the island colony. Now, Louverture institutes a new set of policy enforcing the traditional plantation system so that the colony's shaken economy can produce exports for France, not for another country, for France. He's still loyal to France. He still wants to create a viable economic worth for France. This is an extension and reinforcement of earlier work code imposed by French civil commissioners such as Sontonax, Poverel, and Edouville. The laborers see the policies as an effort to reimpose slavery. Wrong. Louverture wants to make the colony to be viable against the French, so the French can give them emancipation. He wants to prove to be useful. Instead of understanding that, they're seeing that as slavery. How can you sustain yourself if you don't make any business or trade? At this moment of time, you need to make money. So that's what he understood from the get-go, Louverture. The further object to Louverture's plan to import Africans to increase the Saint-Domingue's labor force and buoy its economy. In reality, what he wanted to do, he wanted to reinforce Saint-Domingue. He wanted Saint-Domingue to be a real strong fort and bring additional Africans to make them stronger, to make the economy to get better. And enforced labor means what? You can't stay here, do nothing. You are in a society, you want the society to run, to thrive, then you need to work. It's not slavery, it's work. Like today, you don't want to work. I don't want to work, but we do have to work. But life is crazy. Okay. So 1801. Now we are advancing in time. 1801. 18th of January. The governor of Spanish Santo Domingo cedes control of his territory to Louverture. Now he's controlling Haiti entirely. To make his achievements permanent, Louverture forms a central assembly to write a new constitution for all of Hispaniola that abolishes slavery on the entire island. So already, I'm telling you, his fate is done. Because the French, from the get-go, they wanted to go back to slavery. Because this is the bread and butter of the bourgeoisie. This is how they were making a fortune. So since this is a coup d'etat with Napoleon Bonaparte, it needs the support from the bourgeoisie and from the middle class. Without the middle class, it can't have a government that is accepting its coup d'etat. So it will be in shambles. So already, Louverture, by doing this move with the new constitution, is done already. Louverture achievements during his year in power includes social reforms, structuring and organizing a new government, establishing courts of justice, and building public schools. This is a real visionary man. He has a real vision for his country. He knows exactly what he's doing. He wants to reinforce the economy. He wants to reinforce the military by bringing additional Africans in order to become stronger. If he becomes stronger, nobody can stop him. Not even France, not even USA. He will be totally independent. That's what he wanted to do. February, Louverture called an assembly to establish Saint-Domingue's constitution. It was finished in May and signed by Louverture in July 1801. So a couple of months later. It was sent to Napoleon. Napoleon saw Louverture's appointment as Governor General for life as a declaration of war. He will never say that. He will say that in his memoir, but at this moment, he already believed that he was already in a war against Louverture. It was him, the first of the black against the first of the white. This is what one of my friends has told me today. Even though it's third clause called Saint-Domingue's residence free and French. He's still loyal to France from the beginning until now. Napoleon wrote in his memoirs from his second exile in Sainte-Hélène that this constitution was the final push for the expedition. Toussaint knew full well that in proclaiming his constitution, he had thrown away his disguise and drawn his sword out forever. So Napoleon, you will see, is a military genius, but he's an idiot at the same time, because he wants to prove to everyone that this guy in Saint-Domingue, Louverture, is inferior to him. This is a pissing contest, okay? So instead of seeing that this guy has a certain vision, but he's still loyal to France, he has seen this move as a declaration of war. So in July, in 8th of July, in Saint-Domingue, Louverture proclaimed the new constitution and becomes, as he said, the governor general for life. The French Revolution bourgeois values are emphasized in the constitution handed to France, which sanctions Louverture's structure. Slavery ends, and the constitution says all individuals be admitted to all public functions depending on their merit and without regards to color or to race or color. All colonial births were equal, free, and citizens of France. Voodoo is banned. So this is something that people, the white colonists wanted to get rid of voodoo. So it's giving them exactly what they want. Voodoo is banned, mandatory labor is enacted, and Catholicism become the colony's religion. He's totally aligned with the French. He's doing what needs to be done, and mandatory labor is enacted because you need to work in order to make it work. Otherwise, without an economy, they're doomed. Louverture obligatory labor requirements anger black slaves who rebel. They are against that. They feel this is the slavery once again. The constitution assert French control, although Saint-Domingue remains a French colony. Once again, it's still a French colony, no matter what happens. The constitution seeks to equalize Saint-Domingue to France while granting it its autonomy and benefits. Once again, Bonaparte sees the constitution as a threat, even though it's not a declaration of independence. Just a constitution to organize the colony. But this is a peaceful contest, as I said. Bonaparte's brother-in-law, General Victor Emmanuel Leclerc, restored slavery and the Code Noir in Saint-Domingue. So you see the situation. Toussaint Louverture shows his true color, saying, I'm loyal to France, but I don't want to have any slavery anymore. But we want to work with France. We want to be free and we want to work with you. Now, what he's doing, the backstabbing right there, right here and there, the backstabbing Toussaint Louverture, saying, no, We're restoring slavery and the Code Noir in Saint-Domingue. The Code Noir means, punishment, physical punishment when you don't do what we say. Totally crazy. Planters are growing dissatisfied with Saint-Domingue and want Bonaparte to overthrow Louverture because they want to restore slavery and revive the colony with economic growth and economic benefits, right? Bonaparte sympathizes. Toussaint was no more than a rebel slave who needed to be removed, whatever the cost. So now, 19th of July. This is really important. In the US, President Thomas Jefferson informs the French that he opposes Saint-Domingue independence and supports Napoleon. So they were seeking to trade against the French, but now suddenly they're saying we oppose Saint-Domingue independence. Interesting. This is not yet the independence of Saint-Domingue, but French, since they do everything extremely well, they will get there. October, Louverture's authority faced a large insurrection in the north, and Moïse reportedly engaged 250 whites are slaughtered in Lembe, west of Le Cap, and rebels take Gonaïves to kill whites, unite mulattoes and blacks, and declare Saint-Domingue independent. So now the real fight is starting now. Okay, so they want to be independent. They don't want to be a colony anymore. They want to be independent. There's no more constitution of we French and we part of the big brotherhood. No. We want to be independent. Rebels favor democratic land distribution and accuse Louverture of manipulating the peasants for France because they don't understand what he wants to do. Maybe he doesn't tell them, he didn't tell them clearly what he wanted to do. Moïse opposed his uncle and refuses to force his labor to work, stating that he was not the executioner of his own race and that blacks had not yet gained freedom to work on white lands. Because he wanted the economy to work, but they didn't get it. But now Moïse is arrested, tried without a defense, and shot by Louverture because he wanted to make an example, even though he was his nephew. He violently suppresses the insurrection, killing 1,000 rebels. Divided at Louverture's action, the ruling elite divides even further. Louverture loses left-wing backing, weakening him. He loses support from whites, mulattoes, and blacks, because some people from the whites were seeing him as a real visionary. He could make it work. If he would have been followed and understood by the French government, meaning Napoleon, then it would have been great. So he had support from all the branches. But now he wanted to make it, he wanted to have the laborers to work, but his nephew said, no, I won't do it. I won't tell them to go to work on white lands. We're not free yet. We need to be free before going back to work. Now, late October, Frenchman Leclerc sails to Saint-Domingue. He already said, we want to make slavery back in Saint-Domingue, but it was not yet in Saint-Domingue. So Leclerc travels to Saint-Domingue. He commands France's greatest expeditionary army, 20,000 European troops, the same number of troops that Louverture had when everything was in cohesion. Now it's not in cohesion; it's totally segmented and divided. So they come. They are the elite of the French army. Rochambeau is second in command. And Rochambeau is known to be extremely violent. He doesn't like blacks. He hates blacks, and he wants to kill them all. Bonaparte offers Leclerc detailed instruction because Napoleon is said to be a military genius and a strategist, as Louverture. And he details a next 3 months expedition, what they should be doing when they arrive in Saint-Domingue. First stage, between 15 and 20 days. Leclerc, this is what you need to do. You must convince that Saint-Domingue citizens of France goodwill and peace. You need to tell them we want peace. We're brothers, sisters, kisses everywhere. Leclerc will pretend the troops are protecting the colony and preserving calm, allowing them to land and take over the major port cities. So they're saying before before attacking and everything, all the ports. Second stage, there's no kisses anymore. You fight the rebels' army generals to demoralize and leaderless the masses. No leaders, no structure. Everything will collapse. Stage 3, disarm all blacks and mulattoes and put them back on plantation to reinstall slavery. Bonaparte told Leclerc, do not allow, listen to that, do not allow any blacks having held a rank above that of a captain to remain on the island. Louverture is a general. So already there's a problem. So he's still part of the French army, Louverture, but he's a general. His rank is general in the French army. 1802, now we 1802, 4th of February, General Christophe set fires to Le Cap, burning it to the ground, and in anticipation of the European troops' arrival, he writes, the most devastating war in the entire history of Saint-Domingue has now begun. The 6th of February, Leclerc enters Demage Le Cap. He carries a Bonaparte letter asking Louverture surrender. So he's asking for Louverture surrender. From February 1802 until November 1803, Bonaparte sends 80,000 troops and 408 ships to support Leclerc's troops, some of whom have been in Saint-Domingue since 1792, 10 years in a colony fighting an insurrection. Louverture quickly informs his colonial leaders that the French will reinstate slavery because he didn't want to reinstate slavery. People misunderstood what he wanted to do. His general defect to the French, and after all his letters are intercepted. Northern Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Christophe are stranded. They are isolated. By mid-February, Leclerc controlled the south and roughly half of Louverture's army because people defected to side with the French. So Louverture is totally isolated. Doesn't have any support anymore. Christophe and Dessalines are on the north, stranded, isolated. They can't help in any way. Louverture's only alternative is to wait until the rainy season, several months ago, in hopes that France's men will get sick. In the first week after Leclerc arrived, 2,000 European troops were hospitalized, 3/4 sick, and the remainder wounded. Naturally, you come into a tropical island, there will be yellow fever and stuff, and bugs and stuff. So another 500 men killed and 1,000 were injured after 3 weeks. Leclerc must request an additional 6,000 troops and 2,000 troops per month for 3 months to complete his task. So he's incompetent, but doesn't matter. He wants more troops. Like Bonaparte will kill millions during his wars, asking for more troops every single battles. 24th of March, the Battle of Crête à Pierrot, where European troops attack a Dessalines fort, cost the French heavily. To make up for his campaign delay, Leclerc wanted to recover the fort and shatter Western opposition. Dessalines, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, a black rebel, and his 1,500 black rebel face 12,000 European and colonists, because the colonists are also fighting against the rebels. Dessalines offered a stirring speech encouraging his countrymen to fight for independence. He says, I tell you, take courage. French whites cannot resist us in Saint-Domingue. They will fight well at first, then get sick and perish like flies. Listen carefully. Dessalines will betray 100 times if he surrenders. Take courage. And when the French are reduced to small numbers, we shall harass and beat them, destroy the harvest, and climb the height. Their departure is mandatory. We will be You will be autonomous. We will be autonomous. Whites will disappear. After two Leclerc attacks, Dessalines conduct a brilliantly maneuvered withdrawal of these forces through enemy lines, 10 times their own. Leclerc's failure to defeat Dessalines and his resistance force turned the conflict into the revolutionaries' favor. He's taking advantage. And there were 10 times his number. 25th of March, France, England, and Spain signed the Treaty of Amiens, achieving peace for 14 months during the Napoleonic Wars. By this point, France has gained back control of many of the colonies it had lost in recent years. So Guadeloupe, Saint Lucie, Saint Sophie, all these islands are back into the French Empire. April 1802, Louverture and Christophe are wanted by the colonists. Louverture tries again to negotiate with the French and sends Christophe to talk to Leclerc to learn his intentions. Christophe flees with 12,000 soldiers, artillery, and explosives. Now, Leclerc makes an offer. He says, Louverture, you can keep your staff. Your army grade is a general in the French army and functions. You retire to a place of your choice. Louverture accepts because knowing he can't lose again, because if he loses again, he loses everything. But he's not supported anymore. He's isolated. The only support he had was what Christophe, and Christophe fled with 12,000 troops. So he's done. He's freaking done. Also compelled to succumb, Dessalines grudgingly joined the French, cutting connections with Louverture. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, the more militant, believed Louverture should have expelled the French and declared independence after learning about Leclerc's invasion. Dessalines waits to join blacks and mulattoes to evict the French. So it's making a move, trying to make the French believe that he's going to join them, but in reality, he's not going to join them. He's saying, you made your own bed, Louverture. You should have expelled the French from the get-go and declared independence when you learned about Leclerc's invasion and attempts to reinstall slavery. But he's saying, no, you didn't do anything, so off you go. You're done to me. That's what it means. 27th of April, a Bonaparte edict reinstates slavery and the slave trade in Martinique, Tobago, Saint Lucie. Bonaparte denies in reintroducing slavery in Saint-Domingue and Guadeloupe for the time being. For the time being, he says, doesn't say anything. But if he does do it for the rest of the colonies, it's only a moment of time before it does the same in Saint-Domingue and Guadeloupe. Okay, and that's natural. But Bonaparte is really smart. You know, on some level, I consider him to be stupid. You know, that's my view of it. But he's on some other aspects, on military and strategy, he's really smart. So when he saw the campaign would be over 3 months after landing, Leclerc realizes that the difficulties involved in reconquering Saint-Domingue and bringing to fully under French domination, while people are eminently more formidable than Bonaparte had ever presumed. Because Bonaparte was saying to Leclerc, they are incompetent. The only guy that is competent is Louverture. If you get rid of Louverture, everything is open. But he didn't understand about Christophe, about Dessalines. He didn't know about them. Now he's discovering that they are really formidable. Formidable strategists, formidable military guy, and really smart people. A third of his now Leclerc and a third of his army is disabled, and many have died in battle. By now, 50 European soldiers die daily in hospitals This is a calamity. After the colony's infrastructure was destroyed, the principal cities that had been burnt to the ground offered little or no resources at all, and Europeans had no medical supplies, no clothes, or shoes. They have nothing left. May in May, in order to maintain his current position and takes the mountains in the north and the west, where the resistance army is concentrated, Leclerc estimates he needs 25 additional troops. He writes in June that every day the blacks become more audacious. I'm not strong enough in order to order a general disarmament and to implement the necessary measures. The government must begin to think about sending out my successor, because if he has a successor, it means more troops. But based on testament, people are saying he's incompetent. Leclerc is really stupid, and he's trying to. He thought it would be easy to make a name for himself in Saint-Domingue, come back in France with all the laureates of being a great military guy and to be playing in politics with Napoleon. But in reality, it's not what's going to happen. So now we're still in 1802 in June. You remember Leclerc said, Louverture, you have an opportunity with me. You come back, we'll respect your ranks. You will have all the benefits of your ranks. You will keep your servants, you will keep your benefits. But in reality, when Louverture comes to meet with Leclerc, Leclerc betrays his agreement with Louverture, deceiving and imprisoning him, the governor general. He's a governor general, but he's treated like a common criminal. Leclerc lures Louverture into a conference, arrests him, binds him as a common criminal, like a pig. You know, you bind the arms and legs. The guy's treated like meat, and ships him to France with his family and manservant. Now let's stay a little bit on Louverture's fate, because I need to explain what's happening to him. We're going to move into the future and go back in time. I know I'd love to travel in time, but it's not yet possible. Maybe one day, we'll never know. Okay, September 1802. In September, after months after he had arrived at the Fort de Joux, the Fort de Joux is in the south of France. Not in the south of France, it's close to the Alps, close to Grenoble. Grenoble is close to the Alps, and it's really cold during the winter. Caffarelli arrived and questioned Louverture. Caffarelli is a representative of the French government nominated by Napoleon. He arrives and questions Louverture about the existence of government funds Leclerc said he had stolen. We know where the funds are. Leclerc stole them, but he says Louverture, stole the funds. Leclerc troops had already ravaged Louverture's properties in Saint-Domingue looking for treasures. They accused him of having eaten. They will never find it. Louverture defended his conduct as a French general, saying, I'm loyal, I have a certain integrity, I will never do such a thing. And he complained directly of the treatment he received, despite of his title and rank, and that his arrest was mostly due to his color. Now he is now trying to process the situation. Freaking hell, these French are really fucking racist. Oh yeah, they're freaking racist, and they still are today. So it doesn't realize that even 300 years, almost 200 years later, today in 2024, they are as racist as they were in 1802. Terrible. Now he's realizing where he is. October 1802 to April 1803. So now it's going to be almost, a couple of months. But basically, I'll spare about the gory details. But he's been tortured, beaten, treated like a freaking animal. Breaks my heart because the guy, in reality, the guy is a good guy. I really feel for him because I know he's a good guy. He wanted the best for his fellow brothers, but Okay, as instructed, Louverture is stripped of his military title and separated from his servant and friend Mars Plaisir. Louverture was complaining about the lack of firewood in his cell, which was often freezing, and he started to cough almost constantly. You have to understand what is the cold in France. In Canada, we say it's cold. Yeah, it's cold in Canada, but it's dry cold. It can be minus 20, but it's dry cold. In France, the weather is humid. When it's cold, it's minus in for the jour, it's minus 10, but it's freaking humid. So you're feeling the cold in your freaking bone. You can put a fire, you will never get heated. You will be freaking cold. And your lungs, your throat, you will get constant sickness and disease because of it. So now he's starting to cough almost constantly. He's sick. He's freaking badly sick. One of his guard, Bale, confirmed in a letter to Minister Louis de Cret that he denied medical care to Louverture because he was black. Now he's even saying the composition of Negroes being nothing at all resembling that of Europeans, like they're not humans. Okay. After months of sickness, in the morning of 7th April 1803, Toussaint Louverture, leader of the slaves insurrection in French Saint-Domingue that led to the Haitian Revolution, was found dead by a guard. The guard was called the citizen Amiot, who described in previous January 1803 Louverture's condition as grave, as he was suffering from constant fevers, stomach aches, loss of appetite, vomiting, and inflammation over his body, because he was suffering from an infection that was grave. No doctors have visited him while he was alive in Fort de Joux. They left him to die. Torture, beaten, and left to die with no firewood to eat himself. Louverture apparently died from a pneumonia and a stroke. The autopsy revealed that both his lungs were filled with blood. I thought he was not human. I thought he was not human. Why do you want to do an autopsy while the guy is not human? He's black, so he's not human. Why do you make an autopsy? Anyway, back to the revolution in Saint-Domingue. So we still have a couple of things to cover. Now we're still back in 82 because we were back in June when Louverture was captured and put into a ship and sent to France to die. Okay. Now we're still back in 1802, as I was saying. Popular movements re-emerge in the South with the objective of expelling the French. The blacks and mulattoes sees that despite France claims, Leclerc fully intends to reinstate slavery. He said it. He's moving towards it. Now they understand this is really what he wants to do. In July, Leclerc restores peace and productivity and orders the resistance force back to work in Louverture's absence. When he tries to disarm and subdue laborers, they rebel, join the Maroon guerrilla gangs in the hills. As the revolts spread, many rebel leaders command several thousand men who terrorize colonists. So now this is all. Slavery cannot be, reinstalled again. It doesn't make any sense. End of July, French military losses are dramatically accelerated by the persistent ravages of the yellow fever. Saint-Domingue learns that Guadeloupe has reinstated slavery under French law. So they are the only one left. Okay. The Africans comments Earth Leclerc, who now blames his expedition failings on the early reintroduction of slavery. Had there been any initial doubts as to the purpose of Leclerc's mission with its secret instruction, the restoration of slavery in Guadeloupe, combined now with his measures to disarm the black population and troops, unequivocally dispelled it and left the masses one imperative objective: the unmitigated and permanent destruction of the French presence in Saint-Domingue. Now it's either them or us. That's what it means. August. Saint-Domingue finally learns about Bonaparte's May edict re-establishing slavery in Martinique, Tobago, and Saint Lucie. Bonaparte assures the slave that liberation will not rescinded in Saint-Domingue, but they now know he broke his pledge in Martinique, because he said the same for Martinique. But he reinstated slavery, the same for Guadeloupe. The Guadeloupe was the last one, but he did so in Guadeloupe. The news of slavery's restoration in other French colonies found revolution in Saint-Domingue. People now know, they know slavery is everywhere. So they will be the last standing. Post Louverture, French army black and mulattoes officers joined the revolutionary forces and maroon guerrilla bands. Slave revolt against French rises in the north, organizing the south. White fear grows, and plotters are executed by the dozens as insurrection spreads. In order to manage blacks and mulattoes, the French use intimidation and escalate violence. But I mean, violence, it's crazy stuff. They're hanging out people, they're cutting limbs, torturing people, dismembering people. It's violence, pure violence. The French are really known for the violence and the knowledge in torture. So, for example, in Africa and Cameroon, when they were using napalm and other, other mechanisms to instill fear into people, they know what they're doing. The revolution is now led by common laborers, not military leaders who had fought for nearly 10 years. The struggle that began in 1791 had transformed them. They were no longer, nor could they be slaves. Despite setbacks, these fighters dispersed over the region to proselytize, recruit, assemble, and plan to defeat the French. The whole burden of resistance now rested on them, and they may be fired, hanged, drowned, or gassed to death for resisting. Henri Christophe, one of the black rebels, says, "The danger for France is the general opinion of the blacks. Thus, Leclerc realized he must kill all Saint-Domingue's blacks to achieve his purpose. If he wants to reinstate slavery, he has to kill them all, to kill them freaking all in order to reinstate something new. And they are totally fine to do it. They don't have a problem with that. How many millions of people have died in South America because of the Spanish? How many Native Americans have died because of the European when they come in North America and Canada? How many? 27th of August. In the South, blacks rise up against the whites, taking advantage of an insufficient level of troops. Blacks militia mainly deserts the French, capture the fort of Saint Louis during the night and take the city. This was the first time a city has been successfully been captured by insurgent blacks in the South. Insurrections throughout the region reflect the growing participation of black soldiers and low-ranking officers. These troops forced to fight for the French when the leaders deserted, used their positions and arms to aid insurgent movements. At this point, it becomes increasingly clear that France is steadily losing its campaign to take control of Saint-Domingue. They're losing it. September 1802, a general insurrection spread throughout the entire Grande Anse regions. Maroons descend from the mountains and set fire to 5 plantations and killed 6 managers. The outbreak is part of a much bigger plot planned by an extensive network for insurrectionary activity. One rebel had established a whole network of spies and agents who carried out his instruction to visit the plantation of the area to convince the workers that the French had arrived to put them back in slavery, that they must rise in revolt against the French government, and that at any given time they would assemble at Fond Rouge to receive orders and munition. Now the French, they earn for the rebels, killing anyone they suspect. Now they so much desperate. So everyone they see, they're killing them on spot. Through Leclerc's reports, he reassures Bonaparte that the situation is in control, which is not true. The rebel gains on the European in reality. In the east, up to 5,000 revolutionary troops gather. Black and mulatto officers and soldiers desert with the French troop equipment and begin attacking cities. Because you have to understand that some blacks and mulattoes were still in the French army, but now they're deserting, taking the equipment at the same time. Entire plantations are abandoned and overthrown. There are multiple uprisings throughout the South. Now, the 2nd October, Leclerc realized that in order to accomplish his goal, it will be necessary to completely restart the colony, eliminating all the rebels, killing everyone, and importing new slaves to run the plantation. He writes to Bonaparte, and he confirms that. He says, "If my position has turned from good to critical, it is not just because of the yellow fever, but as well the premature reestablishment of slavery in Guadeloupe and the newspaper and letters from France that speak of nothing but slavery. Here is my opinion on this country. We must destroy all the blacks in the mountains, men and women, and spare only the children under 12 years of age. We must destroy all of those in the plains and must not leave a single colored person in the colony who has worn an epaulette." An epaulette is something to allow to shoot on with the rifle. So they want to kill everyone. That's the goal now. 13 to 14 October, revolutionary leaders, including Dessalines and Christophe, at last defect from the French, taking with them black and mulatto generals and issuing a general call to arms. A new revolutionary army forms with mostly black officers and rank and file soldiers. Blacks and mulattoes begin to form a national identity around the common goal of expelling the French. November 1802, Leclerc dies of yellow fever. Before his death, Leclerc recommends to Bonaparte that Rochambeau succeed him. He is a person of integrity and a good military man, and he hates the black. Rochambeau takes command as Captain General of the colony, writing to Bonaparte for an additional 35,000 troops to defeat, disarm, and drive back the blacks. He becomes known for his extreme violence and massacres, even bringing men-eating dogs from Cuba to hunt the blacks. Nice guy, huh? Command of the French force thus fell to Rochambeau, whose name and by whose order so many atrocities and mass murders, ghastly act, unparalleled since the days of slavery, had been committed in the South and the West. In reality, that even white people are against the method of Rochambeau. Is so violent that people say it will turn bad, because if you uplift the violence, then the repercussion will be even worse. That's the reality of it. 1803, January. Rochambeau requests special permission to immediately proclaim the restoration of slavery, and as the French lose control of more and more of the colony, rebellion erupts in Port Salut in the south, now allied Insurgent black and mulattoes strike at all points throughout the entire plain was in state of insurrection as the black laborers began to raise the cane fields and set the plantation ablaze. They put fires everywhere. Dessalines is threatened by the laborers' independence and resistance to his leadership, and his response, he kills independent leaders who refuse to submit to him, saying they had become obstacles to freedom and therefore had to be liquidated. This is not a democracy. This is really a military phase. So they can't be multiple leaders. There could be only one. And he's the one now that Louverture is gone. But Louverture was isolated nonetheless. So Dessalines, there was no leader until now, and Dessalines is the leader. Okay. The 7th of April, the French troops launch a final effort to subdue the rebel forces. The Europeans are without any money, any supplies, and are forced to trade their munitions for food sold by local women. They don't have anything left, not even food. They're trading munitions. They're trading munitions against food, and the women bringing the munitions to the insurrection. The troops are heavily afflicted by yellow fever and weakened by famine. They don't have any food left. 13th of April, this is really important, the Louisiana Purchase Treaty is signed, and France cedes its North American territory to the United States of America. The sale of Louisiana marks Bonaparte's withdrawal from the Western Hemisphere as his troops are defeated in Saint-Domingue, and he turns his attentions elsewhere. The war is lost. They're not saying it yet, but the war is lost. Over the coming month, General Rochambeau and his troops are defeated from the south to the north for the entire country. Dessalines creates 18th of May. Dessalines creates the Haitian flag at Arca. He rips the white fabric from the French tricolor, with the red and blue representing the unity of the black and mulattoes against the whites. With this, the Haitian flag is born. Black and mulatto generals swear allegiance to Dessalines. He was now the leader, but now is the incontested leader, creating a cross-class alliance to fight the common enemy. Because Dessalines is a former slave, he was supported by the free people of color, and now this is a cross-class alliance. To this day, Fête Drapeau, or Flag Day, is a national holiday celebrated in Haiti on May 18th. August, the French evacuate the troops from Jérémie in the south. October, the Revolutionary Army takes control of the Les Cayes in the south. November, Battle of Vertières, General Rochambeau surrenders to Dessalines after losing the Battle of Vertières, agreeing to a ceasefire as long as French force evacuate within 10 days. To this day, Battle of Vertières is a national holiday celebrated in Haiti on November 18th. Over the course of the campaign begun by Leclerc, France lost 50,000 men, and in the name of slavery. And they had lost what had been the wealthiest and the most flourishing colony in the Caribbean. 28 November, the remaining French troops evacuate Môle Saint-Nicolas in the north. End of November, Dessalines, leading 8,000 men, takes control of Le Cap, officially named Cap Français, and renames it Cap Haïtien. Rochambeau capitulates and flees. Because always the French are saying, no, we're going to stop, no longer fight, ceasefire. You have 10 days to leave, but they're staying longer and try to fight, try to retake possession of different territories. But at the very end, they fought and lost to the 13th of November. Now, 1804, January, in Gonaïves, Dessalines proclaims Haiti's independence, signaling the formation of the world's first Black Republic outside of Africa. He publishes a Declaration of Independence signed by himself and Christophe, and the colony Saint-Domingue is abolished forever. Christophe would later be president of Haiti from 1807 to 1811, as well as proclaim himself King Henry I from 1811 to 1820 in the northern Haiti. The original Taino name of Haiti is officially restored. We're coming back to the roots of Taino origins. And Taino were not blacks, they were Indian. Okay. The proclamation was a formal acknowledgement of the self-determination of those diverse and ordinary individuals of whom the black masses were composed. Very interesting. Though Haiti is independent, Haitians still fear that they will be invaded by outside forces. French troops remain in the eastern part of Hispaniola. France is actively lobbying England, Spain, and the United States to isolate Haiti commercially and diplomatically, but also, economically. France emphasized that Haiti is a threat to the country's plantation system and slaveholders. Slavery is important. Too important to allow Haiti to thrive. The global community shuns Haiti, a major contributing to Haiti's later impoverishment with lasting repercussion until today. Following the independence, France forces Haiti to pay 112 million francs in reparation in exchange for its independence due to the loss of French life and property. Property means property, commercial goods, and of course, slaves. These became known as Haiti double debt, the ransom and the loan to pay it, a stunning load to boosting the fledgling Parisian international banking system and helped cement Haiti's path into poverty and underdevelopment. The double debt helped push Haiti into a cycle of debt that hobbled the country for more than 100 years, draining away of its revenue and chopping away at its ability to build the essential institution and infrastructure of an independent nation. In consideration of today's dollar, Haitians paid about 160 millions in today's dollar. For the time, it was crazy level of money. That doesn't nearly capture the true loss. If that money had simply stayed in the Haitian economy and grown at the nation actual pace over the last 2 decades, rather than being shipped off to France without any goods or services being provided in return, it would have been a staggering 21 billion to Haiti over time, even accounting for its notorious corruption and waste. Because naturally, when you have money that is scarce, everything that is difficult is generating tons of corruption. Actually, the article that I mentioned is not from Caroline Flick. It's actually from the New York Times in 2022. So January, February, Dessalines orders the slaughter of the remaining French residents in Haiti after promising them protection. Black and mulattoes, most of them former slaves, exact revenge on the whites. As many as 4,000 or 8,000 were killed. They are urged on by Dessalines, who famously cried, "Coup peut-être, brûle quai," meaning cut the head, burn the houses. Dessalines is crowned 8 October. Dessalines is crowned Emperor Jacques I of Haiti. So you see, this is terrible. We move from democratic independence and you ended up with a royalty. But anyway, that's typically the transition is difficult for any revolution. 20 of May 1805, Dessalines ratifies Haiti's first constitution to strengthen national unity and bring together the country's various factions. The constitution proclaims that all Haitians black. The constitution also legitimizes Dessalines regime, legalizing structures set in place since independence. The constitution reaffirms the permanent abolition of slavery, that all Haitians are free and equal, and above all Haitians inalienable right to land ownership. The international response, so this is really important. The Haitian Revolution was met with shock and horror by the international community, particularly European powers. France, in particular, was determined to suppress the rebellion and reassert its control over the colony. However, despite numerous attempts, as you could hear today, France was ultimately unable to defeat the Haitian revolutionaries. Haiti was born, but ultimately was subject of the hold-up of the century by the French and was consistently isolated from any form of development economically, financially, trade, and even politically, but stayed free. Was it a revolution from the middle class? Because as I was saying about the American Revolution and the French Revolution, the triggering point is often coming from the middle class, because the middle class don't want to pay only taxes. They want to have political representation and political, rights to influence. So we can say that the free people of color in Haiti were descendants of mixed-race unions who were often seen as pseudo middle class. They enjoyed certain privileges over enslaved people, but they were still subject to discrimination and social exclusion by white colonists. While the counterparts in the American and French revolutions, the free people of color in Haiti sought greater political representation and rights. They were inspired by the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity that were being promoted in Europe and the Americas. We need to remember these are only words. People like Voltaire are saying they are really great critic against slavery, even though they invest into, slave boats. So, which goes against what they're saying. So this is only words. The Declaration of Human Rights in France, is that really something that they respect even today, with discrimination and racism all over the place? No, they don't care. However, unlike the American and French Revolution, which were primarily led by the middle class, the Haitian Revolution was primarily a slave rebellion. The free people of color played a significant role in the revolution, but they were ultimately outmaneuvered by enslaved leaders like Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Despite their limited political power, the free people of color contributed to the revolutionary movement by providing leadership, resources, and support. The struggle for equality and representation helped to inspire the broader rebellion and paved the way for the establishment of an independent Haiti. We have to remember something, that if you see people like Jean-Jacques Dessalines, or the kind of people like Louverture, Toussaint Louverture, they were exceptional people. It's not because you're born a slave that you can't be smart. It proves on the contrary. Every single turn, all the white men we've seen on this planet, they come from humble beginnings. So Toussaint Louverture is no different, a former slave. Jean-Jacques Dessalines, a former slave. They come from all humble beginnings, but the brain is there, the vision is there. So they were great leaders, and they were exceptional people as well. You can't achieve all of that if you are not exceptional. Finally, about Louverture, the greatest hero of Haiti's independence. This phrase, the greatest hero of Haiti independence, is often discussed and generate a lot of discussions amongst Haitians. I'm not from Haiti, but I have some friends who consulted to me as well in the help of making that video. But to me, and that's really my personal take on that. To me, Toussaint Louverture was a fine strategist in all aspects, politically, militarily, and economically. He failed to appreciate the treacherous nature of the French, who never intended to keep their word about accepting a free Saint-Domingue, despite Louverture's attempt to secure trade alliances with Spain and USA. He was misunderstood by his own brothers. he was isolated before being captured without honor by the French, who lied to him, who lured him with false pretenses, who refused to recognize both his rank and his worth because he was really, really smart. To me, Napoleon was really trying to have a pissing contest with him to prove that he was better. But since he couldn't best him, so he resorted to treachery in order to lure and capture Louverture. The utter lack of care for Louverture's life shown by his captors is merely one instance in the large body of mounting evidence showing that medical professions in US and Western Europe have historically dismissed, ignored, or disregarded Black people's physical suffering. Do we imagine what slavery is, or what slavery was to people? The physical and physiological hurt he was putting on people. Such misery, such suffering, and people were not paying attention to that, often with fatal consequences. How many people died from slavery? This is crazy. From the moment they were transported from Africa to the plantations, from the moment they were treated under the Code Noir. This is totally crazy. There are painfully relevant lessons for today in the story of Louverture's death about the disproportionate and wrongful incarceration of Black men, the relationship between denial of care and prison neglect, and the deadliness of racism. That's the end of part 2. I will see you in part 3. It won't be as long as part number 2, but it would be equally interesting. So thanks very much for your time, and I'll see you in part 3.